It's July 17, 2019. 2 weeks from today is the trade deadline. And there are a lot of teams that are ready to make some moves. So, who is the first one to make the big splash? Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Arnie's Fantasy World of Sports. And it's a brilliant Wednesday morning. So much going on in the world of baseball today. We have an afternoon slate of games. We have an evening slate of games, a full 15-game slate. And let's get right with it. Standings, as we look here 2 weeks exactly before the trade deadline on July 31, shows the Atlanta Braves in first place in the National League East, leading the Washington Nationals by 6.5 games in the division. The Braves lost last night to Milwaukee in grand style, losing 13-1, while the Nationals were beating the Orioles 8-1, making that a 6.5 game lead. Both teams have won 8 of their last 10, and both teams have a winning record on the home front and away from home. So watch out. That could be a race, but I still like the Braves. The Phillies last night defeated the Dodgers in walk-off style. Bryce Harper, I was talking about on my 6 o'clock show yesterday how Harper had hit 300 over the last 5 games, but part of the problem the Phillies were having is during that stretch of hitting 300, he had driven in no runs. Well, that changed last night. We'll talk about that some more in a few moments after we finish the standings. The Mets 14 out, and the Miami Marlins 21 games out. The Cubs, they still lead the Central by 2.5 games over the Brewers. Both of those teams won last night. Milwaukee and St. Louis flip-flopped second and third yesterday. Coming into last night, the Cardinals were in second. Waking up this morning, they're back in third, a half a game behind the Brewers in third place because the Cardinals lost last night to the Pirates at home, while the Brewers, as I said earlier, were manhandling the Braves 13-1. The Cubs beat the Reds 4-3. So the Pirates are 5.5 out, and the Reds 6.5 out in the National League Central. Now here's where run differential can be deceiving. I've told you that the Reds have I think it's the 6th best run differential in the National League. It is the 6th best. But yet they're in last place, and wild card wise, the Reds are 4.5 out of the wild card. It's because they lose these 4-3 games, like last night to the Cubs. The Dodgers, losers last night in Philly, they're 63-34 after 97 games. They have a 14-game lead over second place Arizona and a 16-game lead over third place Colorado and San Francisco. Yes, you heard me right. The Padres wake up this morning in last place in the National League West for the first time probably this season. The Padres are 45-49, and they are 16.5 games behind the Dodgers. As we look at the wild card standings in the National League today, and this is where it gets into fantasy talk because of teams trying to jockey trade players. Spent a lot of time yesterday on both of my shows talking about trade partners, both the 6 o'clock show and then my 9 o'clock show last night with Phil Chaplin. Looking at the wild card, the Washington Nationals lead the first wild card this morning by 2 games. Philly is in second for the second wild card. They lead the Brewers for the second wild card by a half a game. The Cardinals are a game out. The Arizona Diamondbacks a game out. Colorado and San Francisco 3 games out of the second wild card. The Pirates and Padres 3.5 games out of the second wild card. And here we go, just the hanger-ons. The Reds 4.5 out, and the Mets 5.5 out. In the American League this morning, the Yankees, what a game last night they had in the Bronx with the Rays. Nip and tuck, and then Didi Gregorius comes up in the 8th inning. Grand slam home run. Wow, way to go. Didi, knocking it out of the park, baby. And the Yankees beat the Rays 8-3. A big win for the Yankees and a huge loss for the Rays because coming into last night, the Rays were 5 games out. And frankly, watching the Yankees play since the All-Star break, they have not looked sharp. It's like they're missing a cylinder. For example, last night, runner on second, Didi Gregorius, ball hit by the second baseman for the Yankees in the hole. Shortstop picks it up. for Toronto. Adames, Didi way off second, running to third on the hit. He was a dead duck at third. Never run when the ball's hit in front of you like that. He ran from second to third on a ground ball to short. Adames throws to third. They get him. Gleyber Torres, as I said, hit the ball. He got to first, rounded first too far. The third baseman then throws over to first. Darno tags him out at first. A double play on what should have been a G6, right? And Didi's still at second. Those are the little things that the Yankees have done somewhat since the All-Star break that they weren't doing before. Tampa had them by the throat last night. The Yankees escaped with a win. That's a 4-game set. They play again today in the Bronx. And then they play again on Thursday. So Tampa's 6 games out. Certainly these are big games. The Red Sox are 10 games out in the division. And everybody else, Toronto and Baltimore, 25.5 and 32.5. The Central Division, the Twins lead the Tribe. Cleveland by 5 games this morning. Minnesota's lost 2 in a row. They lost to the Mets last night 3-2 at home. Meanwhile, Cleveland was thumping Detroit 8-0. The Cleveland Indians have won 3 in a row. The Tribe Minnesota has lost 2 in a row to shrink that lead in the division down to 5 games. Now, how many of you listening this morning, and I need to check the chat room, how many of you listening this morning feel like, okay, Minnesota's got this division in the bag, or how many of you feel like, hey, we got a race here, and Cleveland has great pitching, and they're starting to hit a little bit, and so here we go. I'm of the opinion that, of course everybody's got their opinion, Cleveland's in this thing. This is anybody's division right now, and so we'll see how it goes, but don't count out Cleveland. And looking at wild card, yeah, they're in the wild card hunt, but they're also in the division hunt. Another team that's in the division hunt, if you look at the standings this morning, as we go to the West, the Western Division, Houston leads Oakland now by 4.5 games. That's the smallest lead Houston's had since probably April. You heard me right. 4.5 games. Houston's 59 and 37. Oakland's 54 and 41. Oakland's won 8 of their last 10 and 5 in a row. They beat Seattle last night 9-2. Texas is 8.5 out. So I'm discounting the Rangers, but I'm not discounting the A's. And if the season ends today, it's Tampa, it's Oakland, and the 3 division winners for the playoffs. Wouldn't that be a cross-country travel ride for Tampa and Oakland to square off in a wild card game? Looking at the wild card, Tampa again, a 1-game lead over Cleveland and Oakland. Don't forget the Tribe. So you got 3 teams there within, 1 game of each other for the 2 wild card spots. Boston 3 games out of the wild card now. That lead seems to be increasing. Phil Chappie says, and who else out west, Arnie? I'm getting to them. Okay, we'll talk about the Angels in just a moment as I go down the wild card standings. Angels are 9 out of the division, but they're not out of the race. Boston 3 out of the wild card. Texas 4 out. And the Angels, there they are, Chappie, 4.5 games out of the wild card. And if you were listening to Chappie and I last night, we spent about the first 20 minutes of our show at 9 p.m. last night talking about the Anaheim Angels. What's not to like right now? Okay, the pitching's not that great. It's good enough. And there's something about this team since the death of Tyler Skaggs, from the best player, Mike Trout, on down the line, they have all really performed. Now, Trout probably back today, if not back tomorrow. Andrelton Simmons, since coming off the IL, he's been hitting the ball really well. But there's one player that I haven't mentioned yet, I'm getting ready to. It's still pertinent, Chappie. It's Shohei Ohtani. Hitting the ball with power, stealing some bases, average. He's behind Trout in that order. And something that I read yesterday about the Angels, there's a player on the Angels that I haven't mentioned who's in the top 5 of hard hit percentage of balls in play. And his name is Albert Pujols. And sure, you've heard of him from stories long ago, right? But the fact of the matter is, Pujols is having a pretty good year. If we take a look at Pujols and his numbers, he's hitting .242, okay, 14 homers, 55 RBIs. Over his last 4 games, he's 6 for 16. That's a .375 average. In his last 4 games, Albert Pujols has driven in 10 runs. Did you hear me? 10 runs. Pujols, definitely a factor as we continue on through the season. You know, they got, looking at Ohtani's numbers for the year at .298, 14 homers, 40 RBIs, 6 stolen bases. And he was out over a month. David Fletcher, .299 average, leading off. He's like 6 for his last 21. These guys are hitting the ball. La Stella's out, and Cole Calhoun. Until last night, he did score a run and drive in a run. He'd had hits in 3 straight games. They're pitching. The bullpen is their strength. Okay? And you start at the back end and you work up. You look at Robles, their closer. 14 saves. He has not given up an earned run in his last 6 appearances. But there's more to the bullpen than that. Boutre, the setup guy, a .260 ERA. Then you've got young arms like Felix Pena, who pitched on July 12, 7 shutout innings, no-hit baseball. Struck out 6 and only walked 1. Are the Angels players or pretenders? You better bet your bippy they're players. In this American League wild card, as I look at it today, you've got 6 teams within 4.5 games of a wild card spot in the American League. So, that leaves the White Sox, the Mariners, the Blue Jays, the Royals, the Tigers, 5 teams in the American League. The Mets and the Miami Marlins as 7 teams in the major leagues out of 30 that I think need to be planning for 2020. So when you're talking about trade partners, if 23 teams are in the playoffs, and you're talking about a trade deadline in 2 weeks, and you're only going to deal with teams who are out, so help me out here. Are there any White Sox pitchers that the White Sox are willing to depart with that you want? Alex Colomé? Seattle? Any pitching there that you're crazy about? Toronto? You kidding me? Kansas City? And they traded Homer Bailey. They got a shutout last night. Spellman. Detroit, Matt Boyd. My point being, there are just a handful of pitchers that are on teams who are not in contention. Good morning, Beach Bum. Good morning, Jack Youngblood. Who mentioned the person I was going to for Toronto, Stroman. So if you've got Stroman on Toronto, you've got Boyd on Detroit, you got Colomé in the bullpen for the White Sox. Kansas City wants to move whoever they can. There's just not a lot there in the American League. And in the National League, you got the Marlins and you got the Mets. Okay, so I heard this crazy rumor. Help me out. I heard this crazy rumor. Guess Joanna, go Yankees. I'm with you. All the way. Forever. Got that?